This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, and we're taking it's kind of abstractly related to MTG Finance. If you've been on Facebook or Reddit or anything, you probably saw the Game Goblins Facebook message thread coming across, which was basically LGS owners saying, hey, tell these people we're out of this price. We're going to relist it at the current market price of $400 or whatever the case was. Which kind of got us to talking, why is this such a scummy thing to do? Why is this bad for business? So figured we'd address that as brand management.
Yes.
And it's a bunch of different levels, TCG player, LGS, vendors, online, everywhere. So we're basically going to get into, look, brand management matters. It impacts your bottom line and why it's important.
Yep. So we want to start with TCG player. This one is because it's the most approachable for most people. And it's probably some of the more aggressive brand management that happens because it's not just you that is invested in your brand management. TCG player is also invested in your brand management. If memory serves, they treat it basically like Uber, and after you drop below a certain rating, guess what? You no longer have a store with TCG player. So brand management is very important to them, and how well you serve your customers is very important to them. And when you're on TCG player, and I'll pull this up real quick, you can see under every vendor there's a number, and it tells you the number of satisfied customers and sales they've made, and both of those are, again, very important. You want to pick up something that is a high value, you're going to want to look for somebody with a decent amount of sales and a decent rep. And once you're looking at a vendor, for a price you like for a high-end item, you can actually jump in and you can see what's going on with the seller the last 30 days, 90 days, 360, lifetime. And then you can see, some of the comments that are left. And TCG Player just kind of does this automated comment system where if nobody leaves feedback, it's just 5 stars. And because TCG Player just assumes that, hey, you did what you had to as a vendor, and after a certain period of time, that with a window to leave feedback, positive or negative, is closed, you get 5 stars. Cool. They kind of patched up the eBay system in that regard. And overall, it's a decent system, and it works out really well. For a while, there was this kind of friction where a lot of people in the buyers community thought, well, why would I give a vendor 5 stars if they didn't go above and beyond? Treating 5 stars like a tip at a restaurant. If they want 20% or more than 20%, they're going to have to give me something extra. And we're kind of past that point as well now, which is great because that kind of tanks a brand, or was able to tank a brand, just like giving an Uber driver, 4 stars or less because they did or did not engage you enough, during your ride.
And I think the important thing too is that, if you think about TCG player, a lot of people, their first thought is, oh, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to buy the cheapest, right? Mm-hmm. Well, as a customer, I've noticed that used to be the case, but now it's getting more and more not the case. It's like if I have a choice between this guy that's 15 cents less and Pack Fresh, which is 15 cents more, I've bought Pack Fresh enough to know what I'm getting from them. I'm getting a Pack Fresh card. That's just what it is. Yep. So I know when it says near mint, I don't need to see a photo. It's going to be near mint. When I've had negative experiences, they've rectified it completely. And it's, it used to be that TCG player back in the days where 5 stars was like a tip.
Yep.
It was lowest man on the totem pole wins. The cheapest price is the cheapest price. I'm always going for the cheapest price. And now, not just myself, but other people I know, it's the same thing. It's like they've got 3 or 4 vendors that, if it's really just a few cents away for like a $5 to $10 card or, a $50 card for a couple bucks, you know what? I'm going to spend the extra money and go with the brand I trust and recognize. Mm-hmm. And it's not about, and again, going back to when 5 stars was the tip. Now I'll give them 5 stars because you know what? You gave me the same quality product you always do. And it's one of the most important things about TCG player now is that incidentally, just as the market has evolved, them caring about your reputation as a seller has made people care about your reputation as a seller. It's made it so that you have that known entity that, you know what, you don't have to suffer from the Channel Fireball Damage Lottery, Troll and Toad near mint, those millions of memes from different online vendors. And all right, this company for me, I'm always going to go with them.
Yep.
When I see Harry's House of Cards, I know exactly what I'm getting out of that. And I think that that's, something that as the marketplace has evolved has become more and more important. Because look, I may at times be all about saving the pennies, but when it comes to my cards, this is an investment. I know that there is a chance that I may sell this one day, and I want it to be in as good condition as possible. And I think that's one of the most important things for your TCG player recognition is it ships efficiently and safely, and it's in a good condition.
Yeah.
And that matters because you're getting 15 to 20 cents extra per card just because people know what they're getting with you.
Absolutely. And I think it's not like it goes without saying, but it is kind of important to remember that 100% to 99.9 could be the difference of 1 because we're talking about rounding, but 100 to 99.8 is a lot different.
Yes.
Or anything below that. And might, require a little bit of investigation or anything below that, or it might throw, some flags. And it is on the buyer to eventually begin to learn, this system for their own benefit, because it is also up to the seller to ensure that they maintain a very high reputation for their own benefit on the platform and to stay on the platform. There's I forgot what it was. XKCD a number of years ago did the math on it, and they basically extrapolated it out and said, okay, if you were to do like 100 and so eBay sales a month, the following could happen and never affect your rating negatively.
Yeah.
Ordered stuffed tiger, received real tiger instead. One star. You do enough, it's not going to jog anything. It'll bring you down from 100 to 99.9. But 100 to 99.8 and lower is something is going on there. It could be a bunch of threes because, like I mentioned earlier, people were giving out threes when they didn't receive, the extra. Or maybe it's a conditioning thing, something else, and it's worth the read into. And that allows you to be kind of a savvy buyer, like you said, especially if you're looking for cards for finance.
Yeah.
When I buy cards to play, I generally look for LP or near mint with the expectation that if I order LP, I'll get true LP because I'm going to play them. They're not meant to be finance vehicles. But if I'm going to be buying cards for finance sake, I do look for vendors I recognize or vendors that have a fairly large number of sales because I feel protected by the rating and the number of sales.
Well, and that's, some even Facebook pages, Sick Deals is now lowest reputable seller is what you price off of, because you could have someone, look, new set comes out, great. Some backpacker decides, I cracked a bunch of product, I did great at pre-release, I'm going to sell it all on TCG Player. Well, at the start, you've got to undercut everyone so you can get sales in. That's just how it works. And then once you have an established brand, you start pricing accordingly. So of course, when you go somewhere reputable, you want to spend as a reputable, or you want to sell as a reputable seller. So that's, it's rippled beyond just TCG Player, where you're seeing other marketplaces start to adapt. Okay, what's a reputable seller selling this for? That's what we need to base it off of. And, like you said, when you're getting it to play, it's one thing, but it's also, there have been plenty of times where I've gotten an LP card that just has a fold in the middle of it. And I'm like, all right, this is an LP. In what world is this LP?
Yeah.
And of course, all of a sudden I block that seller and I never have to look at him again. But it's same deal. You kind of have those places you recognize, even if I'm buying LP to play with, I know I'm not going to fiddle with it. Mm-hmm. I know I'm getting this LP foil and it's going to be an LP foil. Yeah. It's not going to be an MP foil. It's not going to be borderline because they're harsh on grading their foils type of thing. And, it is one of the most important things because TCG Player is the largest marketplace out there.
Yes. Yep.
And that's why, especially on that platform, it is so important.
Yep. Absolutely. But there's not much more I think we need to say or I really need to say about TCG Player overall and reputation management out there. As we go through this, you're going to find out that we're going to mention a couple of things and it all kind of sneaks across. whatever happens on TCG Player or in person generally sneaks out into social media as well. Like, it's just sometimes a little more damning for other entities than it is different ones. Like, sure enough, you can find problems with TCG Player vendors on Reddit, just like you can large vendors, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily end your brand. You can end your own brand on TCG Player through your own sheer willpower if you want.
Sure can.
So, moving up the chain, we talked about kind of the LGS level.
Yeah, so LGS is one that, and we've harped on this on the cast, that your community and your reputation is so much more important at an LGS level than probably anywhere else. There's stores in every city. Oh, that's the Yu-Gi-Oh store. Don't go there unless you want your stuff stolen.
Yep.
And then, of course, all of a sudden, the other games start falling off because people don't go there. It's the Yu-Gi-Oh store. Or this place has a really good EDH crowd. Go there. And there's a couple stores where it's known, look, if you're trading there, be careful. You're going to get sharked. These people know what they're doing. These are experienced people that go into the LGS, and it's like a bazaar almost. And I think that, with the LGS, it's probably more important than anywhere else, because once your reputation is ruined as an LGS, there's no reclaiming that. There's no reclamation project. There's no second act. Most of the time, you're done. You're just out. And it's really important that you have that good customer relation with your player base, regardless of the game, regardless of the format. You need to be welcoming, friendly, accepting, and it's really important to have that relationship with your customer and player base. Give you a prime example. So there's a store I've been going to for a while I've been going for Modern, and New Wizards Event Reporter, or whatever it's called, came out. We're paired in the second round. There's 2 Jasons and 2 Davids there. We don't realize it at the time. David holds his hand up and says, Jason. I go, yep. We play our match. The other David and the other Jason pair up, play their match. We don't realize until round 3 pairings come up that we played the wrong person. There's no fix in the current software for that. So guy at the shop was like, hey guys, this sucks for everyone. Here's my proposed solution. I cannot manually enter results. Can everyone enter results for the 3rd round? We'll end the tournament, restart, and do the 2nd round over again. Everyone remembers how their 1st round results went. Everyone voted. Everyone was fine with it. We did it. We caught it pretty quickly. Sure. That's a shop that now everyone who was there that night knows that their tournaments are going to be run well. And when things aren't, they will come up with a reasonable fix that works for everyone and do it. And that's the kind of thing that as an LGS goes above and beyond just having a cool looking space with cool tables and comfortable chairs, which, don't get me wrong, goes a long way when you're sitting there forever.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's, similar to TCG Player. Quality wise, price wise, what you're going into when you buy board games, singles, sealed product, whatever the case may be. There's even a couple stores that are known for like pre-release weekends just having the sickest sealed pools because they're the ones that advertise it better. They take to the local groups for St. Louis and they're like, hey, check out this sick pool that someone opened at their sealed.
Yep.
And those are the kinds of things that as an LGS really make or break your relationship with a community, because it does enable you to have this brand recognition locally, that you are established. You're the go-to Pokemon store. You're the go-to Legacy store. You're the go-to Modern or Sealed store, whatever the case may be. And that's super important because especially at the local level, and this is something I wish a lot more shops realized, you're not in competition with each other. It behooves an LGS to help other LGSs. That's just fact.
Okay.
And I think that by having that collaborative workspace and recognizing, you know what, these guys run Modern on Wednesday, we'll do it on Thursday. That also helps create a welcoming brand for the community at large.
Yeah.
Because then you're not feeding off of you're not cannibalizing each other's player base. It's like, all right, we want to take care of Modern because St. Louis is a Modern city. What nights are we going to run Modern? And there's literally every night of the week in the greater St. Louis area, there's a Modern tournament. And when you go to these places who you're going to run into, what the brand's going to be, what kind of players you're expecting, and just kind of as an unspoken agreement, there's certain stores that the grinders avoid. because they say, you know what, we want the more casual players to have their spot.
Yeah.
They can play there. We're not going to yuck their yum. We're not going to ruin it. And I think that, in a way, the LGS really has that symbiotic relationship with the player base and creating that community and that brand recognition, because you do have to listen so much more to what your community wants at that level. You've got the store that doesn't do singles because just didn't work for them. That was listening to the community and saying, look, you want sealed product? We got you, whatever you want. And I think that, as an LGS, which Game Goblins is a prime example of this, you cannot be scummy to your community if you want to continue to exist.
Yeah.
You can't. And, TCG player, there is that element of anonymity. There is that, like you said, the 99.9 could just be a simple rounding error. It doesn't really matter. You don't get that luxury at an LGS because rumors spread on Facebook. They spread at Friday Night Magic at other stores. Everyone knows, when Miniature Market closed its singles department, a bunch of people immediately were harping on, well, where are we going to get singles from now? And those rumors spread way faster. And I think that's one of the most important things is, your reputation management at the LGS level, to me, is significantly more critical to your livelihood than on TCG Player or as one of the larger vendors.
I absolutely agree with that. A lot of people don't understand the power of word of mouth advertising. And that's what sends people to different stores. You move into an area or you're visiting, you'll use the external reviews that you can find, community-based. If you find anything on that people review LGSs on Yelp or Google Maps or what have you, or if you see anything on Reddit or inside Facebook groups, you'll use that because that's as close as you can get to word of mouth advertising, besides knowing somebody that lives in the area, and that can also be the truest form of advertising, and it can also be the most damning as well, because as you mentioned, rumors spread, and a false rumor is going to do just as much or more damage than any kind of boon that you can sell somebody on with word of mouth advertising for various stores. And I think that's criminally underrated and understated. Also, the ability to kind of control and call your online presence and communities in Facebook allows the LGS a lot of room to maneuver and massage and make things work for them as well, to assuage fears and deal with issues that way as well, and you can be very open about it. It's a Facebook community is kind of the LGS equivalent in my mind of a Yelp review where the owner can respond back to somebody and make it right, and it is on you to do that, because you don't want to push people away. You lose people, you lose your livelihood, you lose your business, like you said.
Yeah.
And
I think...
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, you by all means, I insist.
My point was just kind of going to segue into the next one because it's about an external organization. Something I don't know much about for an LGS is the Better Business Bureau.
So it does matter. Obviously, unethical practices are unethical practices regardless.
Yep.
The thing is, on the scope you're dealing with at an LGS, not likely that they're really going to care.
Yeah.
Could Game Goblins actually get in trouble for these messages? Yeah, absolutely. If there's evidence that they absolutely price gouged and absolutely did this, sure. But for the most part, it's something that, it's not like a Target where they change their policy and you're like, I'm going to the Better Business Bureau because the Better Business Bureau cares about Target. It's generally at the LGS level, you care, but also by the time they would get involved, your reputation's already put you out of business.
Yep.
Because it's so much faster to act. It's so much more like, yeah, look, I pre-ordered a whole case. Here is my financial records. And they said they had no record of it and told me, GFY when I showed them this screenshot. And they were like, no, we don't have your money. And that's why I think the LGS is far less concerned about it, only because they're so much more likely to just get destroyed prior to it mattering.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. When I think about businesses that maintain a Better Business Bureau accreditation, it's very rarely a business that just works locally, because it is the locals that will take care of that business. They will support it or they will tear it down, rightfully so. And so I really didn't think the BBB is something you need to think about as an LGS. I guess as a business overall, it's something you need to think about because it is still a rating system, although a bit archaic at this point in time. I don't know a lot of people who really know about the Better Business Bureau, but it is something I'd want to bring up as we head into the next section, which is larger vendors, event vendors, online only vendors, whatever. Basically, people that own warehouses and sell shit.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we're looking at, and this is a space because we both operate there, but this is again a space where your reputation precedes you. And oftentimes your problems and shortcomings are put on display immediately on places like Reddit and Facebook, and those are pretty widespread. And they make it out to people who go to events or people who frequent the Magic subreddits, finance and otherwise, so they get to see that fallout, and that happens a lot. And like it's not that difficult to summon Ben Bleiweiss on Twitter. He generally responds pretty easily and pretty quickly to most things. But if you want to see Ben Bleiweiss show up in seconds, summon him on Reddit.
Yeah.
And he's there for brand management and reputation management for Star City. He is right there. Because it is so important that they maintain that relationship with the community because they ship nationally, internationally. They have their own tournament series. They have a brand that they need to maintain, and they can't be having their reputation tarnished by their fault or not.
And I think that stands in stark contrast to, he is the Magic heel out there.
Oh,
and that's
yeah.
Dan Bach, of course, who his reputation on Reddit is, he's a scumbag, whatever else, blah, blah, blah. But he's kind of like a weird exception, and that he still does business despite having an awful online reputation. It's just stands in such stark contrast to what you deal with Star City, because he's very much the best way to get rid of a scandal is to not acknowledge it, and Ben is quite the opposite. Mm-hmm. He's like, the best way to get rid of a scandal is to get involved and explain your side of the story and try to speak rationally with someone on the internet, which I have so much respect for Ben for doing that, because that's impossible. But I think that when you get to these bigger things, these bigger entities where you do have this brand management, Star City's kind of unique in that regard, aren't they? Like, Ben's one of the only people that's out there. Like, you don't have Sasso out there for Channel. You don't have anyone out there for Card Kingdom, right?
No. I don't think you can summon anybody but customer service from Troll and Toad. Like, they have a dedicated Reddit account, I believe. And yeah, I can't think of any other large entity that really has anything in that regard.
And I think that's one of the reasons that Star City has never really come up as, like, everyone loves Star City, right? Like, sure, you may not like their prices, but you're still going to pay them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's your complaints about Star City are the complaints you have about everyone. You don't have the memes like you did with, Channel Fireball Damage Lottery, etc. Yeah. In fact, the damage case at Star City is one of the best places to shop.
Yeah, 100%. I like whenever I got a chance on an event, I shop that case. That's how I got my G-Taste for nothing. Like,
yeah,
I had a flat. Who cares?
And that's another great example of large scale brand management, is they're known as, like, you know what? Go to the Star City damage case. Yep. And that's their thing. And that's one of those ways that they kind of manage this just polished good guy image for a bigger entity. And I think that that's, great for them.
Oh, absolutely. And we're looking at brands in that regard. When you look at, and I mentioned Star City has their own events. We mentioned a number of people that have their own events, but for vendors that go to events, you can have vendors that taint their own image. You can also have individuals at vendors that taint their image.
Yeah.
Like, I can name a number of people that I do not want to sit down with because the game with them is smash you.
Yeah. And it's just straight smash you. It's not like have a good conversation smash you. It's just, no, I'm just going to destroy you on value with all this stuff. And that's one of the most interesting things to me about the large vendor GP scene is, you have these brands that have their established, like 95, like Hot Sauce, Card Monster, all that stuff. You know what you're getting when you go there. But then you also have the individuals at those booths that kind of have their own reputation as well.
Yes.
Like me, Garrett, there's all kinds of people. McKinney, there's tons out there that you're like, oh, I know that guy. I've dealt with him before. Hey, weren't you with this other company last time? Yeah, I go where they pay me, type of thing. And I think that's, at that level, it's almost more difficult because you do have that meta reputation management that you have to keep an eye on. You can't hire someone if it's known that the game with them is just smash you. And that's not what you want to be known for.
Nope. Yeah.
And I think, as an individual and as a business at that point, it's on you to have that positive reputation and create positive interactions with people. Because, look, at GPs more than anywhere else, except for maybe the LGS, it is a reputation-based industry. I've had people when I was at Miniature Market walk up and be like, oh, Miniature Market? I didn't know you guys did events. I shopped at your store. Like, you give great prices on the buy list, and they sit down and they engage in a buy based on that reputation management. And I've had people seek me out at MTG first, and they were like, hey, I dealt with you at Moose Loot. I want to deal with you again. And it's, you can't have someone go from company to company if their reputation is bad. You're just not going to last long in the industry.
Yeah, you'll eventually get bounced out. Yeah. Face operated the same way, whether they're in Canada, Europe, or the United States. You'll get a lot of those people like, hey, I bought from you in Canada, or I went to this event and bought from you there, or sold to you there. It was a great experience. And when I saw you on the list, I knew I was just going to interact with you, or you would be the first one I interact with. And it's terrific like that.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting because there are so many more eyes on you at once.
Yeah.
At an event like that your missteps spread pretty quickly. I'll never forget. It was GP. What was it? I think it was Memphis. There was an LGS there. And within an hour of show open, word got out their prices were insane. Immediately the mistake was made. Every player, every vendor, everyone went there, and they were selling stuff for like half of buy list because they were selling it at TCG low because that's what they did in their store.
Got it. Yeah.
And now they're killing it. They went out to dinner with a couple vendors who explained to them like, look, this is why we were there. This is why we did what we did. You're kind of leaving money on the table. They're doing great now. But that event, that one mistake was so magnified because so many people were there that it immediately impacted their reputation for that event and thereafter. The next couple events they went to, people showed up and they were like, hey, your prices were so much less last time. Why'd you change your prices? Well, so we figured out what we were doing.
Yeah.
And, that's an example of one slip up. One mistake can just get so blown out of proportion in the context of that event because there's so many eyes there.
Yes.
It's like you don't want to be the vendor that buys rebacked power and sells it to someone without realizing, because then guess what? Everybody knows at that event you're the booth with the rebacked power.
It will come out. It will. Like, it's ridiculous how fast things spread at events like that. And it is quick from the vendor side as well when you're just looking at operations, on the internet. Things spread pretty quickly. As soon as somebody cannot rectify in the way they were hoping to, or reconcile something in the way they were hoping to, a misstep that was made. One of the more common ones that you'll see, or maybe saw a couple of years ago, I don't know how it really is now. I guess people feel like they get fleeced when it happens. But when you read policy at a number of vendor sites, they basically say, like, our buy list numbers are subject to change. And what we give you up front is not what we will give you at the end. And if we hit quantity before you get yours in, you missed out on the race, and now your near mints are worth less. And that is something that often gets out, and a lot of people feel like they lose out in those instances. And there's no wrong or right way to feel about it because it is policy. That's just how business has to be done, and you can't buy infinite everything. and it is disappointing when it happens. To go back to something for like the Better Business Bureau, like we were talking about before, if that's policy that's set forth on the website and it's made clear, the Better Business Bureau cannot actually step in on that.
Sure can.
They can't.
Yeah.
They don't deal with policy at all. But if you were to have sent in the cards, and like you mentioned before, the company says, "Hey, never got them. Can't send them back. Don't have them." You can go to the Better Business Bureau at that point if you have receipt what happened. The Better Business Bureau can basically help you as a customer attempt to rectify issues that basically deal with the buy and sell of goods and services. Pricing issues, not so much. They can't really do much about that as long as the policies around that are made available. The gaming goblin thing definitely kind of hits the pricing thing when you're looking, well, they just repriced, but at the same time, they purposefully canceled orders to do that. So now the BBB can actually step in and look at it. And a lot of these vendors will look for BBB accreditation because it does matter. As I mentioned, they sell, a lot of them sell worldwide. And it is meant to be the kind of resource and that trusted emblem of like, hey, if I have a problem with this company, they should be able to rectify it themselves. And if I can't, then I can step in and get the BBB involved, and they will essentially attempt to arbitrate on my behalf a rectification to the scenario.
And I think that's super important to have, that established reputation that, they will do something for me. They will, they're going to make it right one way or another. Because especially when you're dealing with a faceless company online, you do want that security. And there's only so far that, my friend shops with them is going to go. Because if, hey, sorry, we never got your cards. That's not good enough.
No. Yeah, not at all.
Just because you didn't screw my friend doesn't mean you're not screwing me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the last little thing I wanted to bring up as, a large vendor. You have your customer service lines, your dedicated reps. You want to do brand management and triage as best you can across the internet whenever anything happens and somebody feels like, something was left undone. There's something that was done in an unsavory fashion. And the BBB thing is, like I said, the last step. It is kind of passé. It is like Reader's Digest, not for our generation, it seems. That information never made it along. But it is important to can be important to your brand and your recognition within the space. You can't just buy that emblem without being within good standing with the Better Business Bureau for what that emblem is currently worth. So it does fall into that. Anything else you want to go over in regards to like large vendor stuff?
No, it seems pretty succinct and to the point. Picks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go first because I feel like it.
Yeah, that works.
All right, cool. So this week, my pick is a card that's kind of spans the gamut between playability outside of EDH and playability within EDH. So it took me a little while to decide what version of this card to go with, as they've all been on the rise, but I've decided to go with Chord of Calling, the Ravnica version in particular. So, you look at stocks and you're like, well, why? And it's been flat for so long. What are we doing with this card? Well, thankfully, somewhere around Strixhaven, it eventually started to pick up. And recently, as you can see on stocks, the market has overshot the average. So people are finally buying back into this card. Now, I added this way back at the beginning of 2021. CK was buying 13 at $2.80. They're buying 25 at $6.40. On TCG Player, they're at 96 at $6.44, and right now they're 49 at $11.88. And this is all LP or better, English only. So, as far as EDH goes, again, it's another highly playable card across any and all green-based EDH decks, which I feel like is the theme of the last bunch of picks I've had. But who am I to complain?
Yeah.
And especially those that rely heavily on combo or toolbox styles of play, because it's a creature tutor. So this goes alongside Whirly Tutor and Finale of Devastation as one of the most reliable ways to tutor up exactly the creature you need at a given moment. I thought about Birthing Pod as being in like the top 5 green creature tutors, but because you need to actually climb the ladder, it gets a little dicey. Now, unless green is your splash color, or you can supplement the search with card draw, this is another, I'm putting this word in quotes, foundational card for the format. I would argue that it's in the upper echelon of green creature tutors, floating in the top 3 but visibility on it overall just seems kind of low. So including this in the initial build of any green deck seems like an obvious decision, and I would expect over time that not only does the price of this card continue to rise as more people eventually find it, but also it becomes more pervasive within the format, verging on, and I'll put again this word in quotes, stable. So right now when we take a look at EDH Rex, it's in 8% of possible decks involving green, and I just think that number is way, way too low, even given the fact that green can be a supplementary color in a lot of these decks. You might just use it for ramp, Sylvan Library, regrowth, Eternal Witness, that kind of stuff. Like, the 3 green pips can't be that hard to scrape together. You got Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. You're not trying to rub 2 nickels together here. And then looking at the commanders, this is all over. Like, everything plays this. Again, you want to play ramp, you want to play aggro, you want to play hand size matters. Cool, here you go. Here's quarter calling. It's going to get you, again, a toolbox piece or a combo piece. That's it. The card just does everything you need it to. So, as far as the timeline goes, whether or not it's the Ravnica or the Origins version, there is immediate arbitrage opportunity from TCG Player to Card Kingdom for the first time since I added this card to my list, and my expectation for this card, if there was no external pressure from Modern, would be that profit to buy less happens in about 6 months to a year based on historical trends, like that really flat graph I just showed. That said, if Heliod Company or anything else pops up in Modern that plays this card, we could see a much faster turnaround based on that. And I want to really stress that. This card really right now only played in Heliod Company, Tokens Company, whatever you want to call that combo deck that just is like Devoted Druid, Vizier of white, make infinite mana deck, right? Because it does exactly what I said it does in EDH and Modern. It finds you your combo pieces or your toolbox pieces needed to build out your board state. So, Modern has the ability to just push this card while EDH is kind of overlooks it and stagnates. Now, there's always a chance that we see this reprinted in a standard set, but having the Convoke mechanic means that it's going to be tied to dedicated development around that. Moving Convoke from Ravnica to Origins means that it's up for grabs almost anywhere, but I wouldn't expect this to truly stifle growth in time. This also makes the Ravnica version fairly palatable compared to the Origins version, as it, alongside the Launch Party version, has unique art. They chose not to upcycle the Ravnica art. They chose to upcycle the Origins art for, I believe it's Double Masters? Yes, for Double Masters.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I chose this over Origins, but I did want to make the call out about the arbitrage opportunity that exists between both. Personally, I picked up Infinite Origins versions when it was printed, 2015. I kept saying Origins. I meant 2015. Magic 2015. I picked up Infinite that when it was $4 or less because the Ravnica version was still floating after the Birthing Pod ban. So that's where I am personally, but in time, I'd be sitting on more than 4 Rav versions. They're 11-ish now, so we're probably looking at 8 to 10, and I think that's where I just want to be on that card overall. I want to hit that $100 mark for this, and then just kind of pause there. Right now, there's a lot of meat on the bones still for the M25 version, about half the price. So you could definitely look into that if you wanted to pick up more for the long term. Give myself a couple seconds. So, Court of Calling. Thoughts?
Yes. Yeah. So I love this pick because it's the type of thing that we've been harping on recently with your series of picks that are good in green EDH. The more aggressive creatures they print, the better this card will get. It's similar to I think, I hate the Secret Lairs as a concept. I think the current Secret Lair, the Second Life one, is great because those Craterhoof Behemoths are only going to be worth more money in the future. Court of Calling is one of those cards that is only going to go up in value the more they print aggressive dudes. It's also the kind of card that doesn't necessarily go great in Standard because it needs to have explosive plays to go with it to be really good. Yes. And they're trying not to make Standard too combo heavy. I could see it, getting reprinted in an EDH product or something or another Masters, but I don't think, long term this is bad because, again, the direction the game is going in, design-wise, is only good for that long term. Like, that card only gets better.
Yep. Yeah. For reference, M15, where the Chord was reprinted, had the Soul Cycle in it. And it came after Theros, which means you could play it with Nykthos to make a good chunk of green. Sliver Hive Lord was in 15. Perilous Vault, which made the blue-black control deck. And, if I remember correctly, Urborg and Sliver Hive, right? So, actually, most of the cards I just mentioned, aside from Sliver Hive Lord, kind of set standard once Magic 15 hit, or 2015 hit. And then we went to cons, and Chord of Calling just kind of became, to the best of my memory, this forgotten card. Because...
Thanks, Collected Company.
Well, even before that, we had cons come in, and we had the Jeskai decks, Jeskai Control Takeover. We had Jeskai Ascendancy, like the tokens version, the combo version. We had the super low to the ground mono red aggressive deck that played the Sarkhan and Planeswalk from cons. Chord was just too slow. There was nothing explosive enough in the format, to your point, that made Chord good. Rally the Ancestors, or whatever the Convoke Reanimation quote-unquote spell was actually the spell that got played in Standard towards the end of its lifespan, because there was this weird Galumpy combo deck that you could play with thanks to Nantuko Husk and some other odds and ends, some of the Eldrazi from Battle for Zendikar. Just kind of made the deck hum. That was about it. Chord fell off. That's why I have infinite of them. They weren't being played. They were super cheap. I knew how powerful that card was from Modern, so I just... Why not?
Scoop them up.
After all, why shouldn't I? Yep, exactly. And Chord of Calling, the boon of Chord of Calling is the reason why Birthing Pod suffers. It's exactly the point you made. They want to keep making good creatures. And I was explaining this to my wife earlier this week. Think about, it's a funnel, right? Whenever they print a creature in Magic the Gathering, when Birthing Pod is a card that's legal in a format, it's a funnel. And every creature is at the top of the funnel. And it all has to go through one fucking card. Birthing Pod.
Yep.
That's it. Yep. Every creature now has to go through Birthing Pod. And they don't want to spend the time to chump check every fucking creature and Birthing Pod. So you just cut Birthing Pod. And now you just...
Problem solved.
Yeah, exactly. You open up the pipeline. You're no longer constrained. That was the constraint on building better creatures, like they said when they banned Birthing Pod to begin with. And it is aggravating because I think that card is fair and balanced overall, but at the same time, I understand the design constriction that it puts on the game. I get that.
Yeah.
The game is better, sadly, for not having Birthing Pod in Modern. But if I want to play Birthing Pod, I can play Nick Fit in Legacy and be my own worst enemy.
Yes. Eight cards with 52 flex slots. Great deck.
The best.
My pick, by contrast, is going much more on just straight market trends, which again has kind of been what I've been harping on. So I am using, as an example, Foil Strixhaven Mystical Archive. Why? Well, for those of you that have been watching long term, you know at one point I picked Invocation Divert, saying this card is bad, this card is dirt, but people are going to start collecting these and it's going to be worth money. So we just recently hit the Invocation surge, where it's now hitting its new floor of about $32 on MTG stocks. Claim the Firstborn and all of the other Strixhaven Mystical Archives have kind of bottomed out. We've reached peak open on those collector boosters. We've got them out there. We don't have many paper events happening, so the demand isn't absurd for those. And this is one of those things that, again, is just a low-hanging fruit. So if you want to speculate on the Mystical Archives foils, I'm using Claim the Firstborn, as now is the time to do so. Now, one of the things that's going to be a little bit uncomfortable about this is the timeline. It took 4 years for the invocations to hit.
Yep.
We have some product constraints due to production with Strixhaven, which may or may not shorten that timeline. That said, you're probably looking at a similar timeline of about 3 to 4 years, which is why I said Claim the Firstborn. It's 50 cents for the foil. That's dirt cheap. Get 20 of them, throw them in a box, and forget about them. Literally forget about them. And then when you move, find them in a box, and they're worth money.
Yeah.
Because enough time will have elapsed at that point that you'll start to see the collectability of the Mystical Archives, which I genuinely believe are the best of the recent collector's run product, be it the alt art Japanese or the standard art. I think every version of these cards is a long-term winner. And I think now with Strixhaven especially, it's probably the time to buy in because we've hit peak open, peak supply, we've moved on to other products, and we don't have paper events yet where people are going to start stockpiling these to be like, all right, I want them in a trade binder because people want these cards, or I want them in my cases because people want these cards. They're out there for the taking, and now is the time, I think, to buy in on this stuff. Quantity on TCG Player has been pretty static on almost all of these. The only one that's had a bunch of liquidity is, of course, you're going to have the high-end stuff, Force of Wills, Time Walks, whatever. But I think, again, low-hanging fruit, least investment with the biggest percentage return. I believe when I picked Divert, it was around $12, $13. So you're looking at a triple up now if you get out at retail. I'm not saying Claim the Firstborn is going to be worth $30 one day, but I definitely think I could see the foils being worth $8 to $10 just based on pure collectability of the set.
For what it's worth, in the last 7 days, there have been 9 orders for 41 total copies of Near Mint foils. So you're looking at like, what is that, 4 point, oddly? Yeah, something per order, which speaks to players. If you read, I can't remember the name, whoever put out the TCG Player article earlier this week. She did a great job of basically talking about internal trend tracking and whether it was a forced buyout or just natural, just attrition. And they basically, internal, the TCG Player, that's how they look at it. They look at orders with 1 because that's probably an EDH player. If it's anywhere from like 1 point something to 4-ish, then you're looking at tournament players, and above that then you have force spikes, people buying bricks, etc. And while the brick buyer does kind of influence the average overall, you can still rely on average per order. But I
don't know, pretty simple, and I think it's one of those things that sometimes just falls under the radar.
Absolutely. I like this as kind of let me rephrase that. You pick Claim the Firstborn because originally, from whatever set it's from, Throne, because of its playability and standard, and I don't remember if it hit there, but it's definitely a historical player card, right? And I think it's worth noting that these do span the gamut. The Mystical Archive cards definitely do span the gamut. And I think you mentioned the boat has already sailed, obviously, on some of the larger ones, some of the more popular ones, Demonic Tutor, Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, right? Those are the ones I remember off the top of my head. But there's still like these mid-ground playables in like Cultivate, Claim the Firstborn, etc., that are a decent look now before they just run away. And all of a sudden you can't find them anymore. And I think that's where we are right now, and I think this is really palatable. And for that middle ground of like playable but hasn't run away yet, I think Claim the Firstborn is a perfectly cromulent option for that. And then people can just kind of watch those that lag behind on their own. Crows and Grip and some other odds and ends that have also been printed a million times. Grape Shot. Whatever.
Oh,
I think.
That card used to be so good. Thanks for managing Pauper properly, Wizards. I don't say that often, but I'm saying it now.
I mean, you can call it that way. I think it's still pretty good in Cube. If I'm going to storm somebody out, I want 10 drills or I want to Grape Shot somebody because fuck Eldrazi.
Yeah, exactly.
The end.
That's the way to do it.
Exactly. Or 20 Crows.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I was like,
that one's great.
There's two silver border cards in my cube, and Crow Storm is one of them. But I think it's a good pick overall. I do like your point about the timeline being possibly unsavory to some people, because this is going to be parking money for a fair amount of time, regardless of whether or not the card's playable. It's just something you have to recognize when you're moving in on this, and trend tracking it appropriately against the invocations is a great thing to do. The invocations don't always represent some of the most playable cards, unlike the expeditions, so it's a really good look for this. And I think the only questions I really have, and I think it's really only time that's going to tell, is, are people going to care more about the alt art Japanese stuff? Are they going to care about foil etched? And how long will the non-foils lag behind? So when will opportunity on those dry up? That was the move I made. I bought 4 of a bunch of the the ones that are in this mid ground. Approach of the Second Sun, that's another one that's in this mid ground.
Oh yeah, that's a great mid-ground one.
All of them non-foil, because I figured they'll be cheap now. They'll be cheap for a little bit longer. I can buy them as I see fit, and then eventually they'll hit. And if I sell, I sell. If I don't, I have a odd brick of interesting looking cards next to me on my desk that I don't know how to file away. But
sometimes you need that.
It's under the foil lot I bought that starts with Aether Swarm Canonist. That's worth like nothing. But yeah, neither here nor there. But otherwise, yeah, I like the pick overall, because I think it's important that we do put up these signposts every now and again to remind people, like, some of this alt stuff is definitely worth watching, and you need to trend track it, on your own if you think it's something you want to move into, and there are obvious callbacks and signposts that we can point to. And so, a lot of this is cyclical, a lot of this follows the same trend, and it's always good to serve as a reminder.
Definitely.
I think that's going to be it for this week, though, right? All good?
Yep, we're done.
Cool. So we are at MTG Cabalcast on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, and Facebook. You can find the audio podcast on Audible, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. You can find me at Halt I Am Reptar on Twitter. We can find you
at Thirsty
We'll
Sizzler.
see you next week.